This is your Edmonton housing market update for the month of December 2022. We're looking at the most recent statistics available from the Realtors Association of Edmonton, which is using the November statistics. We're going to look at the market as a whole, then just the single family home market, then condos, and then we're going to look at benchmark prices for single family homes, condos, townhouses, so you can see how prices are also being affected in the Edmonton housing market. Just want to remind you that you can get a link to these PDFs if you want them in the description below. We'll jump right in, starting with the market as a whole. We're sitting at a listing absorption rate of 18.12%, which puts us into a buyer's market where we've been for a while here. It's been pretty consistent. If you look over here on the right, you can see that basically in July we were just over 20%, then it was just below 20% in August, and then we've been floating around that 18% mark since September. So the relative balance of the market for buyers or sellers has stayed relatively consistent for the past 3 months, and we're not seeing big shifts in the balance of the market. Now, the average price was sitting at $366,243, which is down 2.55% from October and down 4.76% from November last year. So you can see the average prices are continuing to drop. But if you look at this chart over here on the right, that you can see that it's a little bit sporadic and it's jumping all over the place. That's because average prices are not actually the best stat to look at. It gets affected by high-priced or low-priced listings that are being sold. So if there's a bunch of million-plus properties sold 1 month for whatever reason, that can bump up the average price. Or for some reason, a bunch of people are buying $150,000 condos, that'll pull down the average price. The benchmark prices that we'll look at towards the end of the video will be a lot more useful indicator for you on how actual values are changing in the market. If we look at just the average price trend for the year, you can see that it's still up for 2022. It's up 2.3% compared to last year's 6.86%. So definitely lost most of the gains that we got in average price earlier in the year, and now it is no longer looking as solid as what we saw in 2021. Over looking at the active and sold listings, you can see that there was 5,010 active listings on the market at the end of the month of November, and there was 908 sales. So the number of active listings is down 10.23% from last month, but up 1.64% from November of last year. So we're continuing to see inventory levels drop as we get closer to the holidays. That's common. It's partially because some of the listings that have been sitting have sold and they're now off the market. Not as many people list their property at this time of the year, but there's also some people that have decided, you know what, we're getting close to the holidays, or I don't want to move in the winter. So they take their listing off the market and then they hold off until the spring, where we'll see some of that inventory come back online. So it's not unusual to see the inventory dropping month to month at this time of year. We're only up slightly from November of last year, so the inventory levels are actually pretty close to what they were last year if you're looking at the market as a whole for Edmonton. Now, the number of sales sitting at 908 sales, you can see that's down 13.61% from last month and down 30.9% from last year. So that's where you're seeing a bigger change compared to last year. The inventory levels are about the same, but we're about 30% less sales. So that's the volume of sales that are happening during the month. So that's definitely noticeable from a realtor's perspective if in the market there's 30% less transactions happening. But there's still people buying and selling. It's just not at the same pace as it was last year, which is understandable considering how much higher interest rates are right now. Now, the month-to-month drop in sales volume is not as surprising, just based on the time of year, essentially. If you look over here at the right, you can see the balance of sales and the active listings that are on the market, and it steadily came down since the peak in March earlier this year. But the balance, like I said, has been pretty consistent for the past few months. It hasn't really changed that much, even though inventory has been dropping a little bit with just over 5,000 active listings at the end of the month. Now, if we look over at the average days on market, it was sitting at 53 days in November, which is a little bit slower compared to last month when we were at 49 days, and also a little bit slower compared to the same month last year when we were at 50 days on the market. So again, you can see how the average days on market essentially followed the same trend of the balance between sales and listings, which makes sense. Obviously, if there's less listings available but there's lots of sales happening, that's going to bring your average days on market down. But if you've got a lot more listings available and less sales volume, that's going to bring your average days on market up. So those trends typically fit with each other. The market distribution, this is just at what price point sales are happening. This is the market as a whole. It'll look a little different for single family homes and condos, which we'll get into later on in the video. But you can see 16.6% of the market was under 200,000 in the month. 15.5% of it was between 2 and 300,000. 24.3% was between 3 and 400,000. That's the biggest segment of the market this month. And then 20.2% of the market was between 4 and 500,000. After that, we got about 10.8% between 5 and 600,000, and just under 6% of the market between 6 and 700,000. Then there's just under 3% of the market between 7 and 800,000, about 1.5% between 8 and 900,000, and then under 1% for each segment after that. So that's just different segments of the market. Obviously, if you're buying or selling a home in the higher price segments, it's going to be a much different scenario than if you're in the bulk of the market where most of the transactions are happening. You're going to have more competition from both buyers and sellers in those segments. Now let's jump over to the single family home market. We'll look at the same stats, but for just single family homes. But before I did that, I wanted to mention that I've got a new Facebook group called the Edmonton Housing Market Tips, Updates, and Insights group. If you go to edmontonhousingmarket.ca, you can get a link to join that group. It's free to join. I put regular weekly updates on what's going on in the housing market, as well as links to all my latest YouTube videos. You can join for free by going to edmontonhousingmarket.ca. All right, so let's take a look at the single family home market. So the listing absorption rate in the single family home market was sitting at 15.84%, which again is right in the middle of a buyer's market, no surprise there. Looking at the balance of the market here on the right, you can see that it got super tight in February and March. It started to ease back a little bit in April, and it's been a steady decline since then, but the last 3 or 4 months have been relatively consistent with not huge swings in the absorption rate, or what I like to call the balance of the market between buyers and sellers. So we're not seeing a lot of changes with that, meaning it's not really getting that much more extreme in terms of the buyer's market so far. We're just seeing slight drops here in the last few months, which is also sort of natural seasonal change as well. Now, the average price for single family homes in Edmonton was $459,501, which is down 2.01% from last month and down 1.77% from last year. You can see that we've been losing on average price since August, essentially, for single family homes. And if you look at the average for the year, we're still up 5.22% on average for the year compared to 7.66% last year. So single family homes based on average prices have been performing better than the market as a whole, meaning that the condos are definitely not performing as well as single family homes have. Now, looking at the active and sold listings in November, there was 3,112 active single-family homes on the market at the end of the month and 493 sales. So the active inventory is down just under 9% from last month, but up 20.57% from November of last year. So that's a bit different picture than what we saw with the market as a whole. We're still seeing the inventory come down, just like we did for the market as a whole, but the inventory being up over 20% compared to last year is a significant difference. Last year, I would say it was still a buyer's market in November and December, but as soon as we got into February, it changed really quickly, and it was apparent that there was a shortage of single-family homes. Now we're seeing that we have a little bit more inventory going into the end of the year than we did this time last year, which should make it not quite as tight for buyers next year that are looking at buying a single family home. But I do think there's a lot of built up demand that's still waiting on the sidelines. People that are interested in buying a single family home, they're waiting to see how the market's going to shift. Everybody's seen how much interest rates have come up, and they're wondering, how much more our price is going to come down. And they have come down, but I would like to mention that there is definitely the risk that once we get into the spring market and everybody realizes what the new market situation is going to be, there's probably going to be a fair amount of competition between buyers. And generally, I've found the best time to buy a house, especially if you're a first-time buyer and you're trying to get a good deal, typically it's going to be in the winter months. So like November, December, January, not as many people are buying. That was certainly the case last year. You would have gotten a much better deal if you bought in those months versus if you waited till February or later. I don't think it's going to be as intense this year. But if you're waiting to see what the market does, you could end up missing the boat if you wait until the spring like everybody else, because that's what everybody does. There's definitely going to be more to choose from at that point as more properties come on the market, but there's going to be more competition, and you might not necessarily get as good of a deal as you might be able to get right now. I know a lot of people are on the sidelines, but I just like to put that out there, let you know that historically, usually you're going to get a better deal as a buyer if you buy in the winter months. So keep that in mind. Looking at the sales volume's down 16.58% from last month and down 35% from last year. So seeing the same kind of thing, we're definitely seeing a drop in the sales volume. I think it was about 30% for the market as a whole, where it's almost 36% for the single family homes. So definitely feeling that in the market, but you can see that based on the balance of active listings and sales, it's still been relatively consistent for the past 3 or 4 months for single family homes. Average days on market sitting at 51 compared to 46 days last month, so it's a little bit slower, and also compared to last November last year, it was at 44 days, so definitely taking a little bit longer. Just goes to show that if you're selling your house, it's either going to take longer, or you should be very realistic when you're pricing your house and make sure that you price it properly so that you can get it moving quickly. Now, looking at the market distribution, obviously a much different shape than what we saw for the market as a whole, since single family homes generally are much more expensive than condos. Under 200,000, you got less than 1.4% of the market. Between 2 and 300,000, you got a little bit here, you got 7.78% of the market. Second biggest segment is between 3 and 400,000. I know there's a lot of buyers that just love to buy a single family home in that price point. That's 24.51% of the market. And between 4 and 500,000, that's the biggest segment, and that's 28.24% of the market. After that, there's still a significant segment between 5 and 600,000, about 17.5%, and then just under 10% between 6 and 700,000. After that, you're below 5% between 7 and 800,000, and it just kind of dwindles from there. All right, so let's go take a look at the condominium market. Also want to mention I am a realtor here in Edmonton with Yeg Pro Realty, so if you're looking to buy or sell a home in Edmonton or any of the surrounding communities, rural, Leduc, Fort Saskatchewan, Sherwood Park, that kind of thing, feel free to reach out to me at 780-819-5508. We can have a free consultation. You can also book a time on my calendar at booktrevornow.com. You'll just select a time on my calendar, and then I'll call you for your free consultation. You can ask me absolutely anything you have on the top of your head about the real estate market, pricing for specific homes or neighborhoods, and I find that these are usually very useful for people. If you've been watching a lot of my videos and other stuff on the internet, I can help fill in a few of the gaps for you that you might not be able to get just from viewing videos. And there's absolutely no obligation to work with me. I only hope that if you do end up getting value from our conversation, you'll recommend my channel to other people, or potentially work with me sometime in the future when you are ready to buy or sell a home. So you can go to booktrevornow.com, select a time on my calendar, and then I'll call you. Okay, so let's take a look at the condominium market now. So the condominium market, the listing absorption rate was sitting at 16.27%. So again, right in the middle of a buyer's market. You can see that it's even been more consistent with the condo market, where it hasn't moved much in the absorption rate essentially since July. So not seeing a huge shift there. And it wasn't a huge shift to begin with going into February and March, although they did get a lift there. For a while, it was a bit more balanced, but it went back to the same old buyer's market for the condominium market here in Edmonton. Now, the average price for condos was sitting at $213,877, which is up 1.56% from October, but down 2.21% from November. So you can see that November, with that little bit of a raise, looks a little out of the norm there. I wouldn't put too much weight on that, just because it was more than likely skewed from a few higher priced properties selling. So far for the year, condos are up 1.13% compared to being up 3.9% last year for average price. And the number of active listings at the end of the month was sitting at 1,856 versus 302 sales. So the listings are down just over 10% from last month and down 20.95% from last year. Interesting that we're seeing a little bit of a drop in the inventory levels there, especially compared to last year. And then the number of sales are down 7% from last month, which is not too bad of a seasonal change, and down 12.72% from November 2021. So from this, if you look back to what I just said about the single family home market, you can see that the sales volume has not dropped as significantly for condos as it has for single family homes. The single family home market obviously got a lot hotter, a lot tighter, lower inventory, whereas the condo market has been struggling for quite a while. So just off the top of my head, the theory seems to be like the market was already sort of struggling, so I don't think it would have gotten shocked as much from the changes in interest rates. So it hasn't really changed that much. With that said, we'll look at the benchmark prices later, and that'll give you another piece of the market. So the average days on market for condos was sitting at 58 compared to 55 days last month and 61 days last year. So it did slightly better compared to last year. And looking over at the market distribution, you can see that under 200,000 is 48% of the condo market for the month, and between 2 and 300,000 is almost 32.5% of the market. After that, you got about 14% between 3 and 400,000. 3.39% between 4 and 500,000, and then less than 1% for each segment after that. Now, I want to show you some of the benchmark prices here for different markets, as well as the trend in the benchmark prices. So the benchmark price is using the MLS Home Price Index, which is one of the most accurate tools that we have available for tracking the changes in the value of homes. The benchmark is basically coming up with a standardized description of one of the most common properties that sell. So I won't get into the descriptions for each one, but they're going to have a description for the typical benchmark home in Edmonton. You know, is it a 2-story home with this, this, and this? We're not going to get into that, but this is just going to talk about the change in value. Obviously, if you want to get more specifics on the value of your home, I'd recommend reaching out to me, and I can guide you a little bit more. So the benchmark price for all of Edmonton was sitting at 364,000. That's taking all property types into account, which is a 1.8% drop from last month and a 1.6% drop from last year. Now, if you look at the benchmark price trend, you can see basically what's happened over the last year, and you can see that we are down a little bit compared to last November, and we just sort of had a hump that we went up over the course of the year, and we came right back down. So what I've been telling everybody is we've essentially lost all the gains that we got this year. We'll have to see how it continues. We did just have another increase in interest rates from the Bank of Canada, although the fixed rates might not be increasing so much based on what's going on in the bond market. So that's something to definitely watch as well. But if you're wondering about what's happened with values, you can see that they have come down from our peak in, April, May is probably roughly where it was, depending on what you bought. That's the market as a whole. The trend still follows pretty close to that for single-family homes, apartments, and townhouses, but the benchmark price is going to be different for each one of those. So for single-family homes, the benchmark price was sitting at $427,000, which was down 1.6% from last month and down 0.8% from last year. So not quite as much as the market as a whole. The single-family home values have held up a little bit better. The benchmark price for apartments was sitting at $170,000, which was down of 3.1% from last month and down 5.6% from last year. So even though I was talking about how the apartment condo or condo market as a whole has been a little bit more steady in terms of the balance of the market, we are still seeing further losses in value in the condo market as a whole compared to the single family home market. Now the townhouses, their benchmark price was sitting at $217,000, which was down 2.1% from last month and down 4.5% from last year. So not doing quite as badly as the apartment market, but still doing worse than the single family home market. So that wraps it up for the Edmonton housing market update for the month of December. I hope you got value out of this video. Make sure to check out those links in the description, whether you want to download a copy of the PDFs that I've shared with you here today, to join the Edmonton housing market Facebook group so that you can get all the latest tips, updates, and insights on what's going on in the market, or if you'd like to reach out to me directly and book a time to chat with me on my calendar, you can go to booktrevornow.com. If you want to watch another video like this, make sure to subscribe if you click over here, and if you click over here, you can watch another video. All right, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one.